Part 3. Tractors that are here but are not original to the farm. Come here by means of collection or bought later and they help out. First up, a 1935 John Deere Model B. This was the first year they made B John Deeres. In 1934 they started making the A and had good success with it, and they wanted to make a smaller row crop, so they basically copied the design of the A and made it smaller. They made a few mistakes doing that too. If you're not familiar with John Deere's, there's a certain, the very early ones, they're called 4-bolt. They had 4-bolt steering pedestals. You can see there's 8 on this one. I think models, serial numbers 1000 through 3042 had 4 bolts like the A's, but they were too weak and they broke. So that's what people mean when they say 4-bolt. So this one's not that early, but it is pretty early. Considered a brass tag. Only the first year had brass tags on them. Other John Deere's had them on different models, but for the B's, that's what they call a brass tag B. And serial number started at 1000. This is 4413. So this was the 3413th one off the assembly line. It's 149 cubic inch, 2-cylinder, all fuel, which means, you see how there's 2 tanks up there? The smaller tank right here, this was your starting fuel or your gasoline, and then this was your main tank. You could start this on the good fuel and then burn a cheaper fuel like distillate, kerosene, or a mix of whatever you had that was cheaper and more readily available. I'm sure things were pretty sparsely populated. And what you would do is you would start the tractor on that. You had a 3-way valve here, and you would start it on gas, and once it warmed up, this didn't have a thermostat or a water pump. You have shutters on it, and you would actually mechanically regulate your temperature via a rod that comes down the side. And you would basically, you had a manual thermostat. You would shut these to get it hot enough, like 180 degrees is what I've read is what you want. And this manifold, it's called a hot manifold. You can see the carb and the exhaust are on the same one. Once that got hot enough, it would vaporize that heavier fuel. And then you just kind of had to watch your temp and regulate those shutters. Pretty interesting, pretty good idea for the time. I mean, you think about how reliable these were. This came on steel. So you had steel wheels, you have no battery, just have a magneto. There's really not a lot to go wrong. That's the extent of the wiring system, 2 wires. The story with this tractor was, this was actually my great-grandpa's on my mom's side. They used to live in northern Minnesota, and in the early 70s, my grandpa moved down to the cities, probably like 72, 73, and this was one of the tractors that was up there, and he ended up selling it to somebody they knew. You know, in small town, northern Minnesota, there's not a lot of strangers. Everybody kind of knows everybody. And I got talking to one of my great uncles, and I asked him if he knew who still had Grandpa's tractor, because he wished that he would have hung on to it. You know, he sold it for 200 bucks. And he did know, and he went and tracked him down and asked the guy if he'd be interested in selling it. And he said no. And so just kind of forgot about it. And then a couple years later, he said, yeah, it's time to get rid of some stuff. He was in his 90s. So I went up there and talked to him and ended up buying it back. So it was out of the family since the early 70s, and I bought it back in I think 2017. So it's kind of interesting. Made it back, started making some repairs to it. At one point I started digging under the grease on this thing, and I'd seen that it had been rolled over, so I got some parts replaced. You can see that that's been brazed. That's been brazed. The frame's been damaged, so I know a lot of guys like to see original paint stay original, but some of these you just can't. You just gotta fix them the right way. Next up, 1947 Minneapolis Moline Model R. This was a tractor I had bought from somebody 2005. I was in my 20s, still had an interest in these. Or old tractors. I wanted a project. This was going to be my first nut and bolt restoration. Well, time and money and space. Didn't have a lot of it when I was younger, and I finally got around to it years later after tearing it down. And a full restoration turned into a mechanical restoration, which just turned into a repair. These are kind of readily available. You can buy running tractors at auctions and stuff for $1,000 or less a lot of times, so it just doesn't make sense to dump a bunch of money into it. This was parked probably for 15-20 years when I found it. Somebody I knew had it in their garage. So I went through, put a new harness in, re-ringed it, went through lights, and just they put new rear tires on it, fixed the brakes, it needed some stuff. These were made from 1939 to 1954, and they had kind of two styles of them. The first run was 39 through 47, and then the late ones were 47 through 54, which they had updated the dash, maybe the fenders. There's a few things that were different. This is a 165 cubic inch 4-cylinder, or 2.7 liters. Belt horsepower is rated at 24. It's a hand clutch. It's got 4 forward speeds, 1 reverse. It's basically a 3-speed. 4-speed is just a travel gear. You can't do a lot. What's unique about this one is I put a needler seat on it. The original seat is just a backbreaker, and one of my parts tractors had the seat, and it's period correct for the time, and it came on one of the other ones, and I cleaned it up and put it on so you can stand to operate this thing. So all the lights work. You've seen it in some videos. It's kind of a toy, not good for a ton of stuff. Next up, 1945 Farmall Model H. This is a family friend's. He bought it from his uncle, and it's been stored out here for the last year and a half, 2 years. And it fills in, does some light duty jobs. A lot of these older tractors, these first two, they don't have live PTOs on them. Neither does this one. So that kind of limits some of the stuff you're doing, and they're all kind of smaller horsepower. This is a 152 cubic inch 4-cylinder, or 2.5 liters, rated at belt horsepower 24, tested at 26 according to Nebraska. Has 5 forward gears, 1 reverse. Has a foot clutch, which is nice versus a hand clutch of the other ones. Nice little tractor, just tons of them around. They're popular and reliable. This would have been $2,000 in 1953 to buy it new. Last up, a 1953 Oliver Row Crop Model 77. This is my brother's. He bought this, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago from somebody nearby, one of the townships over. Had it with a loader on it, and he had an aftermarket 3-point hitch on it to do his driveway. It was just somebody's utility tractor basically, and he was getting rid of it, and he knew that we had these tractors over there, and ended up buying it, pulling that stuff off, and just using it as a chore tractor. This one doesn't have hydraulics on it. It's got power lift, wide front. These were made from 1948 to 1954. It's got 193.9 cubic inch 6-cylinder or 3.2 liter Oliver Waukesha. Belt rated at 37 horsepower. To buy this brand new in 1954 would have been $3,000 depending on the options. Still had the belt pulley on it, PTO.
You're going.